Welcome everyone. It's 1 p.m. and before I say anything, I'm really pleased to give the stage to Gordon that really allow all this to happen. We all worked on it, but being in Nottingham has been key for all this. So Gordon, stage is yours.
Thank you, Davide, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are in the world. Obviously, it's exciting to have one of these symposia that allows us all to join, although obviously logistically it's sometimes a little bit confusing. So I'm going to try to share my presentation. Let's see how that goes. Put it onto. So you should now hopefully be able to see the first slide of the presentation. Perfect, a thumbs up from Davide. So again, let me echo Davide's welcome to today's final symposium from the SMARTI ETN. I think Davide was being very modest. I think a lot of the detailed work in terms of this big project has been done and coordinated by Davide, and thanks Davide for all your effort, and I'm sure all of us will echo those sentiments in terms of thanking you for your hard work, not only in terms of coming up with the concept of SMARTI and obviously working very hard to get the proposal ready and obviously the project funded, but also controlling the operation and the coordination of the SMARTI activities over the last 4 or 5 years. And obviously through COVID, it hasn't always been that straightforward. So today we are at the end of what has been an exciting journey. We've got the final symposium. I want to just quickly say a few words in terms of what is SMARTI and what was that overall concept that we looked at 5, 6, 7 years ago when we were trying to put together the proposal. And we found that things were changing, the world was changing, transport infrastructure definitely needed to change, and we needed to provide some kind of environment where we could address some of the issues that needed to be done in terms of developing a whole new generation of young, enthusiastic researchers, practitioners that would take us forward in terms of what we needed for our transport infrastructure. And so we looked at a SMARTI vision, including sustainability, providing some form of decision frameworks to hopefully improve durability, maximize recycling, and minimize the effects on the environment, the economy, and social impacts. But we also realized that in addition to sustainable transport infrastructure, that infrastructure needed to be multifunctional. It needed to be able to produce outputs or at least provide a service that wasn't just about transport only, but had other benefits to mankind in terms of optimizing that land use, possibly by adding things like energy harvesting capabilities. We also realized that it had to be automated. Gone are the days when things were very simple. We needed to have a slightly more sophisticated, scientific, 21st century type approach to our transport infrastructure, where the systems could be proactive in terms of communicating, but also in terms of automating the whole process of design, construction, and obviously maintenance of our transport infrastructure. And we needed to make sure that we built in and designed for resilience. In other words, our materials and our structures, our philosophies in terms of transport infrastructure had to be able to adapt to changes, not only in terms of traffic, but also in terms of nature. Climate change is a fine example of things that have changed, that have become more prevalent in terms of trying to understand where we need to go in the future. And obviously all of this linked around a general theme of transport infrastructure. So that was the SMARTI vision. That was where we started, as I said, 6, 7 years ago, and we thought, crumbs, we need to have some kind of network or some kind of training framework to actually do this. And so the training or the SMARTI system, the vision was set up like any other Marie Curie ITN as a training research platform, a combined training research platform, which allowed us to target a number of very high profile partners in terms of partners with experts and educators in the different areas that we wanted to address in SMARTI. We needed to obviously have a range of beneficiaries, companies, experts, people that obviously were interested in this particular topic, but had skills that we could use in terms of research support, in terms of education, in terms of training, in the general concepts of transport infrastructure. So these were the key stakeholders. These were the people that were basically going to benefit long term from having an ITN in this particular area. And then we needed to have the operators, the people that were going to effectively take up this particular technology, the protocols, the guidelines in the different sectors. So the road sector, the railway sector, and the airport sector, and make sure that the work eventually leads to something that can be implemented and the impact of what we've done can be realized. So this was done through 15 fellows, and I'm excited to hear some of the presentations later on this morning or this afternoon, just to see the kind of things that we've looked at. And I know it's been quite a diverse, quite an exciting, quite an innovative program. We haven't managed to get everybody here today, but I think we've got a fairly good spectrum of different presentations that would give us a flavor. And these were done through obviously research or the individual training packages for each of the projects, looking at the three main sectors, so road components, railway components, and airfield or airport components. But in addition, we had an extra element in terms of providing the skills that you need for a general asset management methodology, important decision-making tools and frameworks, and obviously trying to enhance the technology or the innovation in terms of what we were doing for transport infrastructure under the SMARTI vision. So most of the work, most of the training, most of the research was done under two work packages, one looking at transport infrastructure protocols, so some of the high-tech kind of developments that we were doing in terms of energy capture, possibly in terms of special materials, in terms of sustainability, resilience, etc. But obviously it's important that we don't only just do the science and the technology, we incorporate that using the tools at our disposal in terms of implementing transport infrastructure guidelines, making sure that the next generation that takes up this particular mantle will have the skills and the tools to be able to do that in an informed environment. And so we will have a little bit of a feedback in terms of some of the protocols and guidelines that have been put together by some of our industrial partners in collaboration with the researchers. And again, that's been quite a big effort, and Davide has taken the lead in that. And I think that's going to be some of the benefits and long-term advantages of having SMARTI ETN. And just finally, before I hand over to Davide to go through and explain what we're going to be doing today in terms of the program for the symposium, this was a slide that we had right at the beginning of the project, and it's exciting to see how we've managed to realize some of the ambitions that we had. So we started with a concept of today, and today is now probably 6-7 years ago, where we looked at our transport infrastructure and said, crumbs, what we're doing is very outdated. We're using very little limited secondary materials. Most of our structures and infrastructure is relatively passive. It doesn't respond, or at least doesn't interact in terms of allowing us to understand how it's deteriorating and what kind of things we need to be doing. It doesn't give us the access to multiple land use. It basically doesn't cope with changes such as climate change and possibly even traffic changes. And so the SMARTI concept was basically to set up to try to address those different aspects: sustainability, multifunctional, automated, resilience, come up with novel techniques, novel approaches, novel technology, if you like, and then incorporate those into the guidelines. And I'm excited to say, I think we've done that. I think we've managed to, over the 4 or 5 years of the actual ETN, to produce some pretty amazing stuff. And I know we've had a chance to start to disseminate that work at various conferences. I know there was the Nantes APT conference a few weeks ago, and that is exciting because that's where we want to be heading in the next few months and years, to get that information out. And so the impact part, which was our vision, which we hoped we would be able to realize, I think we're there. I think we've actually managed, and I think today will be reflected in terms of the presentations, that we've managed to actually come up with some of these technologies. We're able to have self-repairing infrastructure. We're allowed to have materials and structures that are adaptable to change. We've even got the opportunity to have multifunctional, I guess, impact and output from our transport infrastructure. So with that, I'm going to hand over to Davide. I'm excited, as I've said probably a few times already, to actually see how today's symposium goes. We've got a nice audience, and hopefully we will have a bit of an exchange in terms of information as we go through the day. So Davide, I will carry on flicking through the slides, but if you want to go through and explain the program for today's symposium.
Thank you very much. And really, this was very nice words from you, but I really want to reiterate that I am now at the University of Palermo, for all those who don't know, but really everything that was engineered and coordinated was really possible thanks to staying with colleagues at the University of Nottingham that actually created an environment to allow this to happen. And then you have to put, you know, your part, your contribution, but really it was a great environment and still is. That's why we're really, really grateful that we are all together today. So thanks, Gordon. Now, guys, today I'm gonna actually share my presentation. So just give me a second. I thought I actually shared it, but I can share my screen. This is the presentation. Please, someone tells me if you can see it in a little while. But yep. Perfect. So not this one. Sorry. All right. Apologies, I thought I was uploading the presentation, but it didn't happen. Can you see the first slide?
Yes.
Perfect. So today we are gonna basically put together all the efforts we have done in the last 5 years, really, because we started in 2017, but it was supposed to be 4 years, but due to COVID, we actually postponed 1 year the end of this project. So let me thank all the partners that contributed to this project first. University of Nottingham, University of Palermo, DTU that arrived at the end but really contributed crucially, University of Granada, Universidad Gustavo Eiffel, previously IFSTAR, ACOM, GDG, AFAG, University of a certain point, and Dynatest. Today we are going to have 3 sessions. And during these 3 sessions, we will have designated chairs. These sessions are going to present the main results and what we call prototypes of SMARTI. We will have 7-10 minutes for each presentations, and then a final panel where we will present what we call the roadmaps that are basically the results of our vision. And we hope this can lead in 2030 to the implementation of SMARTI, which is what we are going to present you today as well. Very briefly, the first part is about SMARTI materials and technologies. The second part is about instead infrastructure components. We believe that in order to implement SMARTI, you need to have a multi-level approach. So starting from materials, going from components, and in this case, we will look at what we call automated pavements that have embedded sensing system in it. And then we'll look at transport networks, and we'll see which type of innovations we believe are necessary and we actually developed within the project. This is the details of each of the session, but really I'm going to leave the chairmen to go in the detail. And for the first one is Emmanuel Chelier from Universidad Gustavo Eiffel. From the second one, it's Simon Pouget from IFAG and Professor Gaetano Dimino from University of Palermo. As for the last session, that will lead then to a panel that I hope will shed some light on what we think are the next steps towards SMARTI. And kindly, we will have also Nicolas Autier from IFSTAR, Pierre Orniche from Universidad Gustavo Eiffel, also Nicolas Autier is now from Universidad Gustavo Eiffel, and Airey Nkamwa from is our partner from ITT that help us developing also some of the roadmaps. So we're hopefully gonna have a forum to see together what we think are the next steps to go towards SMARTI. So some house rules before. The webinar is registered, as you can see, and now all the participants will be entered and will be selected as attendees, while the speakers will be only the presenters, and the only presenters will be able to share the contents and unmute their mic. So for all attendees, it will be automatically muted but eventually you can use the your reactions that now we will see to intervene during the panel at the end of each session. Because this I forgot, at the end of each session we will have a discussion panel of 15 minutes with all the speakers, and where all the participants and attendees can interact. For any question during the presentation, please use the chat. We have a very big group here that is supporting us. There is Chiara, that is one of the main organizers now of this conference, but there are also Gabriella, Gasper, and Silvia, which are collaborators that are going to support us, taking your questions in the chat and proposing them during the panel. And just to give you also an idea of how the platform works, so whoever has to share presentation can just use the traditional share button. There is also another type of sharing, which is the PowerPoint Live, that basically will allow presenter to, or better, attendees to see the presentation of the presenter, and they can move between the slide as they wish, and then they can sync back to what the presenter is doing. I just tried to do that and didn't work out, so maybe the next presenter will be more lucky than I was. Other important button, as I was saying, here you can find the people, so everyone that is in there if you want to interact with them. Also, there is a chat that, as we say, we're going to use it to take questions during the presentations and use the reactions to eventually, during the panel, have some question or any remark you want to highlight. To conclude this part, if you go to the 3 points here where there is more written, you can actually take some notes, and these are gonna connect you to some part of your software. This is only if you use the Microsoft Teams software in your computer or the apps in your iPad, for instance. And then you can also change the way you're gonna see the presentation. And really, we suggested to keep the gallery mode and gallery at top, so that you can have the speaker at the top of the gallery. And also, a very important, actually quite a useful one, is that you can have translation of what we are saying. Actually, it's just the live captions that you can say underneath the screen, and they work quite well, I have to say, in English. And if you experience problem with the camera, you can eventually turn off the incoming videos of the presenters, and this is gonna help the internet. So this is some house rules. Really now, before giving the stage to the presenters, I wanted to introduce a little bit of what is SMARTI and where we started. Well, the first thing we ask ourselves, what is a transport infrastructure? So we look eventually at one of the first studies that really tried to shape what is a meaningful vision for smart infrastructure. And as you can see, it is something that is really related to intelligent infrastructure. So something that gets data, probably by monitoring itself. And then from this data, there can be an analysis that can be done possibly from the manager. And then through a feedback that can be given to actually have to increase the possibility of having better performance, then we can communicate back to the infrastructure that somehow is going to adapt to this new system that now we would like to implement. This was where we actually started from, but then we actually started seeing that maybe there is something else that we can have as a smart infrastructure, and we just get back to the dictionary. And intelligent is certainly the first explanation of smart, but there is also good judgment. There is actually wise choice that can be linked to not just something that reacts to a data acquisition and data analysis, but they can help us solve the main challenges of our times. We have infrastructure that has not been designed for the system that we live on now, and really everything is changing very fast in our planet, not just in terms of population, but also in the way we want to govern this population growth and how we want to adapt infrastructure to it. So all these challenges needs to be considered at this moment of our life, and that's why we came up with the idea of SMARTI, which is a transport infrastructure that is designed, constructed, and managed to have this elegant solutions, smart solution in terms of elegant solution, wise solution, in the design phase, but also in the implementation and management phase, so that we can cope, adapt to the main challenges of our time. And then we play with the word smart and created the term SMARTI, which is really a vision that is built over 4 pillars of having sustainable, multifunctional, automated, and resilient transport infrastructure. And we thought that, yes, it's a great idea, but how we can actually implement it? Well, European Training Network of the European Commission, or the Horizon 2020 framework before, now Horizon Europe, they're called doctoral networks, are a great platform for that, because we could have a forum among scientists to actually talk about it, but at the same time, we could have 15 researchers that could grow alongside this development of ideas and concept of technologies, and actually doing research. And thanks to them, we could all participate. So we put together the beneficiaries of this project that I mentioned earlier on, together with a lot of other partners that are actually experts on not only infrastructure management, but actually on smartening the infrastructure. We have people developing sensors. We have people that develop new materials and that work with the transport infrastructure network and so on. So we try to put different skills and competencies within the framework so that the actual fellows could grow in this type of environment. And we come up with 4 main results that are summarized in what we call the guidelines. Okay, so the guidelines are actually a document that now you can download on our website, and we do have in some printed version that are distributing to some of the partners. And this really summarizes everything that we have done in the project, and it goes from the vision to the principle for the application to the prototypes that today we will see, as well as the roadmaps. Okay, so let me go very briefly, because I don't have a lot of time inside each of this. Let me start from the vision that we already mentioned a little bit. Actually, the vision, let me start from the principle, just for the sake of time. So the principle is that SMARTI can be actually conceived by acquiring these multidisciplinary competencies through multi-sectoral, international, and collaborative research, but also training. So the idea is that we will train this new generation of researchers, that they are going to be the ambassadors of this new vision. But at the same time, we will educate the person that actually are working together. As Gordon said, I think we managed to at least contribute to change the mindset. And this will then lead to cultural change. That is always a much slower process than 4 years. So we wanted to train also these fellows in each of the pillars. That's why we organize thematic training week in different parts of the world. So we gather together for a week and we train them on what is a sustainable transport infrastructure and so on, or multifunctional, automated, and resilient. And then another very important principle is that we wanted them to work not only on materials or on network, but actually to have solutions that can be adapted to different levels. So some of them work at the material level, some of them work at the infrastructure component level, some of them also work in the network level and so on, but they were all talking. So they were all aware that the transport infrastructure engineers ecosystem, it is not divided, it's something that is connected, and these solutions can be implemented in one of these, but they need to talk with the other level, otherwise the change is not going to happen. Other important part is that we follow the so-called technology readiness level to actually try and explain how important it is that we start from basic principles and to follow a certain path to drive the technology development. And in the end, we end up with some prototypes and roadmaps that we divided in the different pillars, but really all the projects are actually touching all the pillars we will see later on. And we divided in decision-making frameworks, asset management methodology, and technology concepts. Here you can see a big picture that tells you each of the early stage researcher, this is what is ESR, how it can be identified in one of these boxes, but actually really each project and the dialogue we had in this 4 years led each project to touch all of these boxes. So very briefly, really, what is the vision? That we have sustainable transport infrastructure that are designed to last, to maximize recycling and minimize the impact. Both a technology development, here's an example how technology development of asphalt material can be supported by sustainability assessment. And this is something that needs to be included in our practices, really. But this has to happen also during the management of the assets. And this is some other concept that we tried to introduce within this pillar. Costas was one of the fellows that most works in this pillar, but really all the fellows managed to develop something that is more sustainable. We like to call SMARTI as a smart solution for sustainable transport infrastructure. So really the first S at the beginning of SMARTI is not accidental. We also developed a roadmap that now I'm just going to show you, but there will be a panel to discuss it. Then we went to the multifunctional transport infrastructure, where the idea is to conceive something not for transport only, but actually something that optimizes the use of this planet Earth. And here are some of the fellows that work more on this topic. We have Domenico, Maria, Mario, and Rufus. And really the idea is to conceive infrastructure that are not used for transport only, sorry, but for instance, that can harvest energy from the use of the infrastructure itself. And this is what I'm going to see in some of the project. Again, the roadmap is going to be shown later on, so I'm not going to steal our more time. Let me just go to the automated, that we thought being infrastructure that can be equipped with sensor to allow the proactive communications is more or less what it was called from at the beginning with smart transport infrastructure. So giving an intelligence that will allow better use and better management. And this we think can be done by embedding technologies, but also using other type of sensor that can be mobile phones, it can also information from satellites, but we didn't go in the direction. And this really to improve the design, but also the use and the management. We developed a kind of cluster working on automated pavement, and this is what is going to be shown in the second session. And the idea is to understand which sensor can be used to form what we call the live labs, that through Internet of Things can then send data to asset manager to allow to have a better analysis of the data and then giving a feedback to the pavement to allow it to adapt. We're going to see it again in the session 2. This is a roadmap that we're going to see in the final panel. And let me see with the concept of resilient. Let me finish with the concept of resilient transport infrastructure that are conceived to self-repair and be adaptable to change. do it to any type of hazard, either natural or anthropogenic. And the idea here is that we need to engineer preventive measures to allow any manager or any designer to possibly not pass the so-called point of no return. But if the hazard is so much present and out of control that goes beyond a point where we can actually go back to the normal service, we need to have mitigation strategies. So we need to have strategies that need to, again, not lead the infrastructure to the damage or the disaster that we can see, unfortunately, many times in different parts of the world. So really, for us, the resilience is the capacity of our infrastructure to recover from difficulties by managing the risk. So we want to have preventive measures and mitigation strategies that allow us to predict, react, and manage the risk, the hazard that can happen and usually happen and in our transport infrastructures. Also, for resilient transport infrastructure, we have a roadmap. We will see later on. So let me conclude, and really just to say that an integrated approach as the one that has been shown was fundamental to make this wise, smart decision towards the implementation of what we see is our SMARTI vision or smart transport infrastructures. So this is it. Really, from my side, this is a video that I wanted to show you now, but unfortunately there is no time. It's in our website, and is really the summary of the whole project with the vision and how we actually implement this idea. That what I try to explain you. Please go on our website and see it, and but we will eventually see also some clips during the panel. So I'm gonna finish here.